So I'm Alex Nitu. I work as a product manager and technical strategist at Cloud Favorite for the past 6 years now, I think. Before that, I worked in startups, in government agencies, in enterprise companies. So I have an experience of more than a decade, I think, close to 15 years now, I think. So I'm here to tell you a little bit about the CRA, which is a new EU law that's been implemented for a while now. And the CRA is basically the Cyber Resiliency Act. And we'll look at basically how this impacts Wordpress, open source technologies, and everything software or hardware related. Basically anything with a digital footprint. So if we look at this, here's where we are currently. So the CRA entered into force back in December 2024. So that means we're officially 1 year into this transition period. And so for a long time, the narrative around this was, this is coming, but tonight I'd like us to consider this other narrative, which is the clock is ticking. We have exactly 24 months left until full enforcement that begins in December 2027. So in the world of enterprise software cycles, 2 years isn't much. That's basically nothing, right? So if you haven't started your roadmap to compliance yet, you're already late, basically. You need to get a move on. So what is the CRA? What are we talking about? So the easiest hook for it is, think of it as GDPR for code. It's essentially, so for decades, software developers have operated with a get out of jail free card. So you know what I'm talking about. It's that one line in your license file that says this software is provided as is with no warranty. And so the EU effectively said, not anymore. So the CRA basically shifts liability from the user itself to the actual manufacturer of that particular product. So if you ship code, whether it's for a smart toaster or for a WordPress plugin, you are now responsible for its security. And you can no longer basically outsource the blame to the end user. And as an aside to this, the initiative basically started because of Internet of Things. They weren't really looking at software developers or software products. They looked at Internet of Things. They looked at smart fridges, smart toasters that had default root passwords shipped with them, that always phoned home, and that provided a huge vulnerability to effectively your smart house or to your digital presence. And for those of you who are interested in security, you likely know that the majority of these very large distributed botnets, these hacking systems, operate primarily from Internet of Things devices. So, okay, but what is this all about? And how does it impact open source? And you'll probably think, okay, I'm open source, I'm exempt from this. I'm not selling my product. And indeed, the law does have an exemption for pure open source software developed by nonprofits or hobbyists. But there's a trap here. Because the EU defines regulation quite broadly, as you likely know already, and this, the target for it is based on commercial activity. And this commercial activity concept is quite broad. Right? So what does it actually mean? Do you accept donations for your open source plugin that's free of charge? That can be considered commercial. Do you have a freemium plugin that you offer free of charge again, but with a premium, with a paid upgrade? That's also a funnel, so that is a commercial product. Are you an agency that you're just building a site to help a client sell shoes? You're also liable for this law. So most of us in the room likely fall in this commercial bucket. And so that's good to know that there's a lot of impact that comes with this law. Okay, so what is a manufacturer or a product? Who's on the hook? So if you're a plugin developer selling a license, you're the manufacturer. If you're an agency building a custom solution, you're the manufacturer. You can't just say, oh, my site got hacked because of a library I used. Under the CRA, if you bundle it, you own it. You're basically responsible for the entire supply chain that you deliver to your client. So this is quite scary at first glance, but we'll soon find out that it's not necessarily the case for all use cases. But enough legal theory, right? There's practicalities to this, because it basically changes how we actually code and how we actually build these products and deliver these solutions. Because basically you now have mandatory security by design requirements. So what does that mean? Like I mentioned, you're no longer able to use insecure defaults. You can just ship with debug modes on, and you need mandatory integrity checks for updates and strict data minimization. So if you don't need that data, you don't collect it. And what are these actual practicalities? So there's basically 7 pillars of secure software development, and what it looks like for good on OSS communities. And we can dive into this for a second. Signed provenance and updates, right? So you need to prove the origin that you're the actual owner of that release or that version or that product or that plugin or theme or solution or project or website. You need to be able to have reproducible or verified builds, right? So this is deterministic. You have independently verifiable. So what does that mean? That means I'm able to build your solution and confirm it has the same unique identifier. It is exactly like you've actually shipped it. And there are a lot of options here, and you can look at some practicalities in a second. One thing that I've noticed recently is GitHub actually introduced this in their release features, where you are able to configure it to say, once I release this plugin version or this package version, it is immutable. I no longer am able to edit that particular distributable file or that particular source code. Once I've tagged it as version 1, it stays that way and never changes. Hardened release processes, right? So this is, and again, I think for most of us already do some sort of techniques or workflows around these pillars. For the CRA, it's important that we actually talk about it and publicly show that we're following these concepts and best standards. So in the case of hardened release processes, we're looking at 2FA, so two-factor authentication, verified commits, peer-reviewed releases, and so on. Automated health signals. So this is quite simple, it's quite straightforward. Is the health checks for, again, your website or your product or what have you. SBOMs and VEX. So these are some cool concepts that I think this is the largest hole that we'll see, the largest gap that we'll see. So SBOMs are basically the software bill of materials. It's the ingredient list of what you actually ship. And then complementary VEX, I think it's vulnerability exchange program. I have it written down, let me check. Anyway, it's basically a way for you to say, look, I know there is a vulnerability in my code base, but it doesn't really impact it. So maybe it's a vulnerability in Webpack, the tool that you use to build your assets. That only runs locally on your machine, and so you don't distribute it, you don't ship it. And so for cases where you do have known vulnerabilities that don't really impact your source code, you need to provide a VEX file for that particular case. And that's quite straightforward. There are a lot of tools and industry standards that we can use to just automate a lot of these processes. Continuous fuzzing and triage. So again, a lot of this can be automated. You basically need to have quality gates, quality checks, right? Let's search for vulnerabilities. And with NPM and Composer and a lot of these package managers, you already have that sort of built in, right? Think of NPM audit. That's just basically one command that you run to check for vulnerabilities in your code base. And so finally, which is maybe less so relevant to individual product builders, governance and compliance. So you really need to have, again, very publicly and very forward-facing, a set definition of who's actually in charge of this product, who actually reviews it, who's responsible for the security of it, and who's the owner and the maintainer of your project. So let's move forward. Vulnerability handling. So the process around this. Here is the maintenance burden, right? There's two big numbers that you see here. 24 hours and 5 years. And this is where things get a little bit more difficult. So if you have an actively exploited vulnerability that you become aware of, you must report it within 24 hours of you becoming aware of it. Where you report it, it's an EU agency called ENISA. They are working towards building a portal for these reports. They haven't really yet started building it, so there is still some runway for us, but it is coming. And then the other big number, the 5 years. Basically, you are legally married to the code that you ship. The latest version of the code that you ship, you have an expected product lifetime for it. And that's usually 5 years. So what does that mean? That means abandonware, let's build a plugin and sell it once and then that's it, becomes a legal liability risk. So something to keep in mind here. Then for the SBOMs, the software bill of materials. So as I was saying, this is basically the ingredient list, right? You must know every single library, framework, and script that you include inside your product. So every vendor code that you leverage, you need to be aware of it, and you need to actually list it. That does include WordPress as a framework itself. And so at Cloud Favorite, the place I work at, we're already seeing this with enterprise procurement departments effectively demanding SBOMs, where they won't sign a contract without actually seeing the ingredients list, like what actually makes the cake first. Couple of other practical examples. Signed provenance and updates. So again, you enable commit signing, you require it for all committers, and you basically have a check mark there. Reproducible and verified builds. So if you commit your log files, that enforces and sets an actual version of all your vendor dependencies and uses that whenever a third party rebuilds your product from source code. And then for hardened release processes, yet again, you have actions that can GitHub actions or just some your automated CI/CD pipelines that you can configure to just automatically run security checks on merges, checks for valid keys and commit signatures, or otherwise blocks that particular release or merge request. And to continue on here, so automated health signals. You can enable Dependabot, Snyk, or any other vendor thing. There's a lot to choose here. There's a lot of options to choose from here to basically scan your repositories for these security updates or reporting vulnerabilities in your source code. SBOM and vexes, as I was saying, there are industry standards and broadly utilized tools already that will generate these SBOMs for you. And you'll need to preserve these with each release. Basically, again, every time you ship a new product or a new version, you have to include these files in it. And they are machine-readable formats that can be, again, automated and tested automatically. And then for continuous fuzzing and triage, once again, you absolutely are able to do this manually. And if you are a larger team, you can have a dedicated security team that will do continuous fuzzing and will constantly try to break your code. But otherwise, you have automated tools to do this for you. And so for governance and compliance, which again really only applies if you're part of a larger group, you need to have a security.md file, let's say in the simplest example, that lists exactly who is responsible for the product that you're shipping. And then part of this is this self-assessment document that if you offer a critical product, they call it, which again, this is broad and subject to your own interpretation, but that's how it works. If you offer an important product, a third party needs to vet your code, needs to assess your code. And that assessment is basically checking for vulnerabilities, checking for consistency, for reliability, and all the other quality gates that you usually work on, or that you usually leverage. So again, not a lot changes in your day-to-day workflow, right? You still build the code the same way you're building it, up to the quality standards and security standards that you impose yourself, and you still need to maintain it. With the CRA, you need to be, again, explicitly vocal, very publicly outspoken about how you actually follow these procedures. And they will absolutely vary from case to case, right? For a larger agency, there might be some more stringent requirements. For a single person building a small plugin that they sell for $5, they're most likely going to be fine just by doing their current workflow. So what's the impact really for the WordPress ecosystem? And there is some impact here. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, right? So if you're just a plugin or a theme developer, you have a documentation burden, right? You need to write all of these technical files, these risk assessments, these user documentation, which maybe all of us do, maybe only some of us do. It very much differs, and we all know that user docs and documentation itself varies from case to case, even with actual underlying languages with PHP or the frameworks themselves. They are hit and miss sometimes, right? But then the cost for it, because you need to assess your conformity to the CRA. And again, as I was saying, self-assessment is allowed for non-critical software, which isn't really very well defined. But important software does need a third-party audit. And so my prediction here is we will see a consolidation. So small hobby business plugins will either disappear or they'll start merging into an entity that has the resources to deal with all of these, or otherwise exit from the European market. And another asterisk here, it doesn't really matter if you're not selling your product on the EU market. If you have a developer that is in the EU, or you have any sort of business interaction with the European Union, you are liable, and the CRA does apply to you. So for agencies, now agencies need to update their contracts and their SOWs to explicitly handle this 5-year support period. How that would work, again, it's still a little bit fuzzy. I've met with a couple of EU experts just last month about this, and they themselves said, listen, we're not really sure if the CRA will apply to agencies or not. Maybe they just offer a service, maybe they offer a product. It's, to be safe, consider that it will apply to agencies as well, and that's what I'm telling you as well. It's better to be safe than sorry, especially since the fines for not complying to the CRA go up to 2.5 million euros, or I think it's 50 million euros, or 2.5% of your global revenue for that year, whichever is highest. And then again, there's an extra liability concern here for agencies. If you install or recommend a non-compliant plugin that causes a breach, you are most likely liable for that problem. Because you are basically the integrator, you've delivered that this product to your client that includes a vulnerability, even if it's not of your own making, even if it's a vendor vulnerability. Now, for WordPress core, things are a little bit brighter, right? There is this steward role, this open source steward, the stewardship role where the WordPress Foundation very likely qualifies for it. So what that means there are much less things to worry about, right? They're basically saying the CRA doesn't really apply to you, but it sort of does. It's more of a recommendation for you to do it rather than you're forced to do it, because you're not really selling a product, you're just offering as open source. But then, just the same, you could as well consider it as a market share type of issue. Since WordPress core decides not to follow the CRA, then Joomla or Drupal or another CMS or a paid CMS could do that, and then they'll become that much more attractive to developers and clients and users and so on. And then the final asterisk here is commercial entities that contribute to core, right? So agencies or hosting providers or so on, the 5 for the future, they might have these obligations regarding their contributions because, again, they are a commercial entity. So what are a couple of example cases for the CRA? The freemium plugin that I told you about. So you have this plugin that has a free version and a pro version. So what's the analysis here? What happens? Is this plugin liable to the CRA? Is it not? Is it just the premium version or is it both? Well, the answer is it's both. They both need this security process implemented because they need an SBOM, a clear vulnerability reporting channel, because you have the free version acting as a funnel to the premium version, which is effectively a commercial process or a commercial tool. And again, the B2B agency build. I build a custom portal for a bank using WordPress. I write the code myself, and so I'm liable for it because I'm selling it, and so the CRA applies to me. Another case, I'm just building a blog website for a friend of mine that's going to pay me to actually build their website for them. I just use off-the-shelf plugins and themes, I just configure them, integrate them, and build it and set it up for them. Does that still apply to me? Yes, it does, because you are the integrator. You are still the manufacturer of the product, even if you haven't really written any sort of code. Since you've built it, since you've configured it, deployed it, and set it up for them, you have the responsibility there. But so do all the other vendor plugins that you've used, right? So you've picked from this plugin shelf a few paid plugins that you've purchased and integrate them with. Those plugin builders also have this responsibility. So it's up to you to decide, do I want to go with this plugin that doesn't have the CE mark, which with the CRA, all software products will have, just like with physical products, the CE mark, Certification Européenne, I think it is, right? So you'll have that, and you'll be able to use that and add that to your software product to show that you are CRA compliant. And so again, all of these vendors do also need to do that, and you will be able to vet what type of vendor solutions you pick based off of that compliance. And so there you go. You need to offer a 5-year support period. You need to provide SBOMs. You need to provide responsible vulnerability disclosure processes and everything that comes with the CRA. So is the CRA just a headache, or is it sort of an opportunity? And I'd like us to maybe try and end this on a bit of a more positive note, because I know this feels like red tape. It feels like bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy in a sense. And in some ways it maybe is. It's the EU, so that comes with the territory. But in the enterprise space at least, trust is the currency. So if you think of it this way, clients are scared of hackers. They are scared of liability and what they're on the hook for. So if you can walk into a room and say, look, our software is CRA compliant, we have SBOMs, we have resilient federated infrastructure, you aren't just compliant. You win that business. So I've got a few links and relevant reading material for you guys, and I think Lumi will put it up on the website where you can access it. Crowd Favorite also has this obligations questionnaire for the CRA that you can play with it and fill the form out and figure out if you are liable for the CRA or if the CRA applies to you or not. Again, spoiler alert, most of the times the CRA will apply to you, but that's that. Thank you for listening to me as tell you about some random new EU law. I'm very open to questions and I'm happy to answer them to the best of my ability. I just want to leave you with this. There's 2 years left on the clock, so let's just use them wisely. Thanks so much. There you go.
You said something about the hosting providers. So if I'm offering only hosting provider to a client that he himself installs whatever he likes, I'm liable for what he installs?
You're not liable for what he installs. You are liable for the service you are offering, right? You might be considered an integrator or just a manufacturer. You provide the hosting solution. So at that point, your responsibility ends. You are responsible for CRA compliance on the server itself, the underlying services that it uses, so MySQL and PHP and Nginx or whatever, and that's where your responsibility ends. You need to have a CE mark, you need to go through all the CRA hoops, but that's it. Once that's completed, they are responsible for what they're doing. And if they're not selling what they're building, it's just for them, they don't care about the CRA. But your responsibility just ends at the services or the tools or the software that you are offering.
For instance, there are websites that use PHP, I don't know, 7.6.
Sure.
Even if I offer them 8.4 or whatever, they don't update it because they have to do something to that code.
Yeah.
And they will be...
And that's a common case for WordPress, yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you do then?
I'm responsible for their website being hacked.
You're not responsible for that. No. Your responsibility is to sensibly disclose these vulnerabilities. You will be able to deliver them an SBOM saying you're using Nginx, MySQL, whatever, and then a VEX file that says for PHP 5.4 there are the following known vulnerabilities that won't apply or do apply to you only if you're using that. Rest assured that we know about it, we have informed you about it, and it's now your responsibility to say, yes, I choose to use this, knowing the risk involved, or I choose to upgrade to a more recent version of PHP. And I think PHP 5.4 at least has reached its end of life too, so at this point, it's very much their responsibility. So again, you are passing the buck a little bit here, but insofar as you publicly or you explicitly and you have the paper trail to show that yes, I have actually informed this client of mine of the risks involved if they choose to do this.
So paperwork.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah.
And if I have governmental clients, let's say agencies of whatever, and I build their software and they have huge turnover. How is those fees applying to me? I could be fined with an amount of their turnover.
So I don't really have all the details on the actual floors and the plans for the fines themselves. And again, they are still very much in progress. One thing I can tell you is, or a couple of things I can tell you is, even if the timeline is as it is, the behind the door understanding or consensus is this will very much, just like the GDPR, this will be rolled out incrementally. So they will immediately go after the large players, the large IoT players, and immediately go after them. As they start gaining traction, as they start consolidating their vision or their strategy and their direction, it will start rolling out to smaller entities and to more discrete use cases. For government agencies or for government use, that is another barrier to go through there, because the CRA doesn't really apply to critical infrastructure, which for government agencies you can basically consider it as critical infrastructure, because a government agency will offer to the country in question some sort of service, maybe based on the software that you built. And in that case, the CRA no longer applies. There is another law called NISE2, NISE2, which has been going on for a while now and has much more stringent requirements, which I can't really talk to you about because I'm not really that knowledgeable in that area. As far as fines for you goes, it will most likely be based on what your turnover is, what your income, your business income is. It's not on your clients, it's up to you. Because they are not crazy, they're not living in a bubble, right? This expert group or the EU Commission. They know that it has a lot of impact, and they've estimated it at around 200 and something billion euros, which is, I think, 2 or 3% of the entire industry, or the software development industry, or the products with digital footprints. And so they are working with industry experts, with open source experts, and there is an actual a request for comments and a request for feedback, and they are actively looking for experts in all of these various industries and environments and ecosystems to give their input and to provide their expertise on the subject. Because they know they don't know everything, right? So they're looking for the subject matter experts to advise them on where to proceed. And one thing that these two experts said recently, I had the privilege to talk to them. They said something that really stayed with me, and they were paraphrasing again the EU Commission. They were saying, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So my suggestion here is get involved, look out, do your own research, and reach out to the EU Commission, to subject matter experts, and ideally have a say in the direction of this, or at least be as informed as you can. And there's a lot of research that you can find. Just at a Google search, there's a lot going on. It's just like, for me, I was a bit blinded by this. It came from out of nowhere. Just a few months ago, like, wait, what's the CRA? And then in a couple of weeks, like, oh, okay, so this is actually in progress, it's actually been approved, and it's coming soon. So let's get a move on and deal with it. So yeah, I don't think I've answered your question perfectly, but at least a little bit, I hope I was able to offer you.
But anyways, if it's smart, it's vulnerable for sure. No matter if you are NASA or NSA or CIA or whatever. So it's strange that if we use something which now is not vulnerable, it's not a guarantee that in 2 months someone finds vulnerability.
Of course. And so that's the thing there. They're saying once you become aware of a vulnerability, you have 24 hours to report it to the
but reporting doesn't mean patching it.
Of course, they're not saying we're going to eliminate software vulnerabilities completely in the EU market. They're saying we're shifting the blame or the responsibility from the end user, where they just got hacked and there you go, nobody's going to help you, to the actual manufacturer, to the actual product maker. And so if the product maker does its due diligence, which again, quite a broad term, what does due diligence mean? It can mean very different things from person to person. If they do this due diligence and if they take these steps seriously, they should be fine. They won't get fined, right? I've become aware of a vulnerability. I've reported it. There are some rough and some potential dates and targets that they're looking at. I think it's 3 months, or for non-critical services from when you've actually reported it to the time you actually patch it. So you have a little bit of leeway between reporting it and actually patching the vulnerability. Obviously, you would want to do that as soon as possible, but legally you have some bandwidth after you've first seen it and heard of it to the point where you actually patch it.
And if you use, let's say, certified plugins, a limited number of plugins, and let's say something get hacked, and the client's database is encrypted or, I don't know, stolen, whatever. So you were the integrator and you are the blame. You are the blame because you made a product. Can you go to the product owner, the plugin maker, builder,
That's a very good question, and I've asked the same thing in the room with these experts, and they weren't able to give me a clear answer. The safe side is you're to blame because you've provided it, you've delivered it to your client. It was your responsibility to make sure you're using the highest quality of vendor code, and then if it broke down, if they got hacked, you're to blame. How much you are to blame or where the buck stops, very much unclear. My expectation is you won't really be able to just say, yeah, I'm not responsible, this guy is responsible because I purchased the code from them. Mm-hmm. But you will be able to say, okay, I've reported this thing, this vulnerability, I reported to ENISA. What is this vulnerability? It's part of this one vendor code. And so then the EU Commission will say, okay, you don't get a fine, you've correctly reported it, you've done the steps to secure it or patch it on your system, that's fine, that's perfect, deal with your client as you can, because then that's your responsibility that you won't really care about your interaction with your clients. And then they'll go to the actual vendor and say, hey, look, this person reported a vulnerability on your own code base, you failed to do it in the 24 hours that you allotted, you get fined. That's what I expect to happen, and that was the general consensus. But don't quote me on this, it's still very much up in the air, which I'm sorry to say, but it is what it is. Yeah. Anything else?
From my point of view, it's an opportunity because I'm a little freelancer. And I have a lot of maintenance plans, and that will high up the price.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's very much a financial opportunity as well.
Yes, I'm very careful with the plugins. The Wordpress team has a security team who sells code. I don't know.
Audits?
Yes.
Yeah.
Audits, yes. For big plugins, or popular plugins.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's absolutely correct. And again, I think, especially if you're a freelancer and you work on your own, you don't really have a team to worry about or to align with. I'm assuming you already have a process and a workflow on how you build this code, on how you deliver it, and how you maintain it. And so I think the majority of times, most of us will have hit these targets quite well. There's probably just a very little to do to improve on the actual delivery and the technical aspect of things. Maybe the S-bombs, maybe the immutable releases. The biggest thing is going to be the bureaucracy. Just publicly stating, yeah, I am a freelancer and I'm building and I'm maintaining these websites, but I have this one page on GitHub or somewhere that I can publicly validate and confirm it, that I am doing the steps, that I have an S-bomb for my releases, that I am consistently checking for vulnerabilities, and it's me who is responsible for the product that I'm
From time to time I made little plugins, connectors from other two big plugins. And I think they are secure, but I don't know.
Again, that's due diligence. And so in your case, since you are a freelancer and it's just yourself, due diligence can very well mean I've tested it and did my best, to the best of my ability, to test this and make sure I'm not exposing critical information or sensitive data or my client systems to the outside world, to a malicious actor. That is very much enough, as long as you document it. As long as you're saying, look, I've read through every single line of my code, I've tested it with these automated tools, I've tested it manually, and that's the extent of my ability. I don't have endless time, I don't have endless resources, that's the best that I can do, and that is due diligence in your case. Obviously, a large agency or a huge multinational company won't be able to say the same. They will need an actual dedicated security team that does in-depth pen testing with highly involved processes. And so again, it differs from case to case. In your case, just doing this minimum amount of effort will very likely be enough, as long as, again, as you publicly publish it.
Probably will be as GDPR for little sites. little GDPR.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, they're not going to go after the freelancers as an individual. They're going to go after the big companies that are glaringly releasing products with glaring security vulnerabilities that they don't really care about because they provide the software as is. It's the end user's responsibility for making sure their system is secure, which, I mean, I can talk at length about this, about doing smart home things or smart plugs or whatever, that they just consistently ping their Chinese servers or around the world servers with random data that I never really agreed to share. And so that's where their immediate and biggest focus lies. And so as they...
so Microsoft will withdraw from Europe because Windows or many other operating systems are...
Yeah, it's absolutely, yeah. So all of it is falls into the CIA umbrella. It's going to be an interesting couple of years for sure. And we'll see how the market adjusts. And then once we actually see some, and I mean, that's already happening sort of at this point, and obviously a lot more is happening behind closed doors on these large companies. An industry trend will definitely become apparent. So there will be, just like with GDPR and cookie consents, we've seen a unified direction eventually, right? We had some trials and some examples and some test runs up until we got to a point where the industry standardized itself and aligned on, okay, this is the correct direction. We will be offering better privacy on our websites. We will be compliant with the EU law, and we will continue forward. And so very similarly, that's going to happen this year as well. There's going to be a couple of very public, very large fines happening, and then people will actually start getting involved and say, okay, I'm Microsoft and I actually need to release this Windows with a CE mark and actually do my due diligence. And so how can I best do this? Let's figure out the workflow, let's figure out the process, let's figure out the tools necessary. And again, the majority of the tools are already there. You have basically the entire toolbox to build this now. You could be compliant if you're a small agency, if you're a 5-man person, if you're a single developer, you are able to be compliant with the CRA in probably a couple of months' time. Same with the lifetime of the product, that 5-year maintenance period. That is also still very much in here, and I've asked these questions before too. Like, what happens if I don't know? My contract ends with this client. Am I still responsible for that software product, even if they're still using it? If they're not paying me for a maintenance contract, am I still on the hook for that 5-year period? Yes and no, sort of no, but sort of yes. So a lot of gray lines. My hope is
retire.
Yeah, exactly.
If I retire, I mean,
yeah, it's hard. My hope is, or my optimistic understanding is, for services or for websites, for projects that you build and you deliver to this one client without releasing it to the public market as a product that can be purchased multiple times, you don't really have this responsibility for a 5-year support period. Because your contract basically, the contract that you have with that client basically takes precedence over the CRA. You have a maintenance contract for 2 years, that's how much you actually are able to support that product. Once the maintenance contract ends, you effectively no longer provide that product to the client. It's done. If they're using it, it's their own responsibility of using it. You no longer support it. But yeah, we'll see how that shapes up and how that ends up working out.
Thank you.
What about the CE? Will be something like a certificate in the future, or you can tell this release is CE and this will apply to CRA?
Yeah, so the CE mark will become accredited certification. You will be eventually able, once they finalize and build this portal, to log in, create your account, set up as your own individual entity, and say, look, I have this one product, maybe it's a WordPress plugin, let's say, that I want to certify. Here are the required documents. I have version 1.01, I have this SBOM, I have this VEX, I have this governance and security model, I've done the following requirements, please provide me with a CE mark. And they will publish basically this certification that can be publicly accessible and searchable to confirm that indeed your product is compliant with the CRA and you are able to officially use the CE mark on your software.
And what about the old software that you released in the past? You need to update it, you leave it like it is?
If it's a commercial product that's still being used, that has clients or users that you have income from, that you receive money from, yes, that will apply. So it applies.
And if you develop something custom and you deliver it for your client, you need to inform him about it. You need to do this, I don't know, updates or.
Yes, so if it is within the 5-year support period, so let's say you've delivered this product today, right? And then the CRA comes fully into effect in 2 years. You still have 3 years for you to actually support that product. There's 3 years left for you that you are responsible for that product. Once that period ends, which is again, it's a 5-year period from the last release you made. So if you've released this product today and then a year from now you release an update, that's when the 5-year period starts, from the latest release, from the latest published date. So 5 years from now, you're still liable and you're still responsible for that product, even if it started before the CRA came into full effect.
And
So it applies retroactively to anything and everything.
And if the client will do changes on it?
Sorry?
If the client will do changes on it?
If they make the changes, you are no longer responsible.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's all the source code that you provided. And again, that comes into I reference back the SBOM and the software bill of materials and the actual all this bureaucracy and documentation that you provide with your product. If it is complete and it is correct, this is basically a form for you to be protected against things like this, right? So you might have a client, let's say, not happy with you, maybe let's say in a moment of bad judgment, they've considered they've modified your code to introduce a vulnerability to then hold you responsible for it. If you have all of these documents configured and confirmed by the EU Commission, by the EU portal, then you are able to say, no, this is not my source code, it has been modified, it is not me who is responsible for it because I have a reproducible build. I have a verified and signed release that shows exactly what the source code for my product was. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they kind of obligate us to actually make release cycles. Because, I mean,
yeah.
working on enterprise, we already do this, but
Yeah.
for freelancing, I mean, you can like go on PTP and like change something, right?
Yeah.
It's not a release, but you handle on how you have to do it. You have to do actually a release. You have to change because you change the source code, so you have to do the release, right?
Yeah, so hotfixes are sort of a thing of the past. A hotfix, you won't be able to do a hotfix and just modify this one line in your source code, push it up, and not actually tag it as a version or do any of these additional steps. You need to go through the entire process for any sort of version updates.
So, from what I understand, if a friend tells you, help me to add this in my website, and their website has a problem, you will be responsible, even if you put like only the year or something like that there.
If you were paid for that effort, yes, but you are responsible only for what you actually deliver.
Oh.
If you deliver one line of code, then the CRA won't even look at you. But yeah, theoretically, you still need to do all this due diligence. But due diligence for one line of code, it's superfluous. It's nothing to talk about, right? You very likely won't even be able to get a CE mark for one line of code. But as long as you're paid for it, you're responsible for what you deliver. And then another thing that's interesting here, what my colleague Alex was saying, there's a supply chain angle here to consider as well. And so there's been some recent drama with WordPress or whatever. I don't really want to get into it, but consider how you're actually able to install plugins and themes on your WordPress instance. Where do you go to? You go to plugins.wordpress.org. You go to WP admin plugins. And that is a single central repository. So what happens if a malicious actor gets access to it? Or what happens if the owner or the maintainer of that repository decides, listen, I'm going to take over your plugin because I'm not happy with how you're marketing your hosting service. As a random example, whoever knows what I'm referring to. What happens if I decide I'm actually going to take ownership of your plugin and now it's mine? And what happens if I want to release a new version that adds in a crypto miner in your website? Who's responsible? And what happens then, right? So an optional alternative to this is having federated and distributed repositories here. And one thing that I'll hint at, or that I'll just quickly add in here, there's this initiative between CloudFavorite that we've spearheaded and the Linux Foundation, as well as a bunch of other large players in the WordPress space, for building a solution, an infrastructure that solves this particular issue, where you have the option to pick and choose and select which repositories, which sources you want to install your vendor plugins or your themes or your vendor code from, with actually verifiable identities that get peer reviewed and that you implicitly or fully trust, because you get to decide where that vendor code comes from. And so if you're interested in something like that, if you want to read a bit more about it, I invite you to go to fair.pm, F-A-I-R, fair.pm, and you can find out more about that. There's been some great progress there, and it's part of the Linux Foundation, so it's a very non-political, very neutral and open governance model. So yeah, I'm very excited for it. But yeah, that's my little spiel for it.
What about the old licenses that you use when you develop your code?
What about them? What do you mean?
They will need to be changed right now. Regarding if you do like an open source license for your code, you don't need to use it anymore for future projects.
You still do. So if it's purely open source, if you're not making any money from it, the CRA doesn't really apply to you. You don't need to become CRA compliant. You can, and it's recommended that you do. You are highly incentivized to do it, but you won't get a fine. You won't need to follow these regulations. If it's open source, great, awesome. You're contributing to society. Kudos to you. But yeah, you don't have to follow the CRA. So for licenses don't change. It's still GPL, it's still whatever, but the CRA takes precedence over that particular license. So if your license is saying, I provide the software as is, there's no warranty, there's no guarantee, I'm not responsible for it, they don't care. The CRA comes on top of that. Sure, you got your license, it's whatever MIT or whatever form of license you have, they won't care about it. And the general consensus in the EU Commission is that these types of open source licenses like GPL, like MIT, were a very cool concept. They had some traction at the start, but they ended up failing. They ended up not really being as impactful as they needed to be. Because if you take a look at actual historical law instances, they didn't really held up in court. So when with your back against the wall, faced against an actual legal matter, when somebody is suing you or there is an issue on copyrights or responsibilities or vulnerabilities, these types of open source licenses don't really have any sort of impact. They don't hold any power in a law, in a legal environment.
If we have a client, let's say we built 2 years ago a project for a client that we delivered one-off without any updates or any maintenance afterwards. And in another 2 years, everything is fine, but after those 2 years, so 4 years have passed, they have been hacked or something. I'm still liable if I don't have any income for maintenance with that client? What do you think?
Yeah, you should be liable, in the sense that how will that come to pass? How is the EU Commission going to become aware of it? Where your client will get hacked and they'll say, okay, who's to blame? What's happening? Where was the issue here? And so if it's purely your source code, purely your software, purely your product that no one actually maintained or performed any modifications on, you are responsible for it to the extent that somebody decides to come after you. To the extent that your client is saying, okay, I need to sue this person because they've built this website for me and now it's getting hacked. And so you might say, okay, but the CRA wasn't in effect when I first released this. So I don't have an SBOM, I don't have a VEX, I don't have this and that. So what happens then? The EU Commission will figure that out hopefully soon before the law actually comes into effect. My expectation is, again, from the discussions I've had, they're not crazy. So they understand that there are a lot of details and that's why they've intentionally left it as vague as possible. So they themselves have room to decide what happens. For the most part, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. So it's not going to be this thing, it happened this way for Microsoft, and so for everybody else in this room, it's going to happen the same way. And we're going to get a lot of fines, and we're all not going to be able to build websites or plugins anymore. That's not going to be the case. You'll need to eventually find, or one case, one example will need to happen before they figure out their boilerplate response to cases like this. But yeah, and then finally it will all be, the responsibility will fall on the actual EU member states and how they actually enforce this and how they actually create the agencies that deal with this new law. So it will be a Romanian agency that will need, just like with the GDPR, that will need to actually enforce this and apply the fines to and test these out. And so we all know how that works. We'll see when we get there. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it won't be a shit show, excuse my language.
And if we build software for countries outside EU,
You're still liable because you built it inside the EU. Yes.
You can go on vacation in Gibraltar and build it there.
If you're an EU citizen, or if the legal entity, the business has an office in the EU, the CRA applies to you.
so if I make a company in whatever country,
And if you have an employee who has an EU residence, that applies to you. So it is very broad, right? So again, if you have a business that is purely located in the US and they only have a single part-time QA tester that's in Romania, they are responsible, they are liable for the CRA. Even if they never sell to the EU market, just purely by having this part-time employee that's a European citizen, that applies to them as well. So they're going after everything.
Maybe there are some agencies in Asia or something.
That's not even that easy.
definitely there's going to be a lot of cases where agencies or folks straight up exit the EU market. That's absolutely going to be the case. At the end of the day, if you look at it from the end user perspective, from a consumer perspective, it's nothing but sunshine and rainbows for you. You're only going to get better and better software products moving forward. Sure, as a manufacturer, as the integrator, your life gets harder. Mm-hmm. But really, for the common person, they'll see, they'll be able to buy and purchase better software products. Which I think, if you ask me, and then taking off my developer hat, I think it's been we should have had this for a while now. It's something that's a glaring issue with this. Like, why does my smart fridge need to ping all of these servers from halfway around the globe with all of this data, with whatever I have in my fridge, with whatever I browse, with all of this personal data? I mean, come on, that's insane. Especially when the majority of those just ship with username admin, password root. That's all it is. And it's publicly accessible, right? So yeah, it's insane. If you look at Stuxnet, I think it is, and there are a couple of other more recent botnets, they are 95% of them are composed just by Internet of Things devices. So if you have some smart devices in your home and you haven't done your due diligence, the steps required to actually lock down your network and secure it, I bet you at least one person in this room is part of a botnet, is part of a malware network with one of their devices DDoSing or being used as an entry point for a malware network. So yeah, it's crazy how lax these regulations have been so far. And so yeah, for me the CRA is a bit of a love-hate type of thing, where I've exited the government agency and the government space just because of bureaucracy and having to write the same document 4 times and pass it over to 4 different bureaus and desks, just because of this reason. And now I'm faced with the same issue again, where I need to, whenever I want to release a new version, a hotfix for 1.0.1 for adding in a comma on a string of text. No, I need to go through all of these annoying steps. At the same time, it will improve the quality of what we're building, if you want or not. And so I know with WordPress and with web development generally, it is quite a low barrier of entry for folks that want to become a developer, for folks that are interested in this, and it's easy to get started with it, and I think that's great. But it also comes with this caveat or with this gotcha where anybody can build it, so anybody will build it. And so there's a lot of software out there, especially with WordPress being 40% of the internet. There's a lot of websites out there that aren't really taken care of, that aren't really following these very common and simple standards and processes, right? I was talking, I think 6 months ago with the representative from a big host, one of the largest hosting providers for WordPress. And they were showing me their actual install base and their websites. Believe it or not, I think 25% of all of their websites were running PHP 5.4 with WordPress 3 or 4 or whatever. So all of this abandonware, all these websites that still work, sort of, and nobody really takes care of them, nobody really gives them some TLC, some tender loving care, and they end up becoming entry points for malicious actors that make your life a living hell. So better to as an ecosystem, as an industry, as a community, to actually level up the quality of what we're delivering. Because really, at the end of the day, it's a bit of a personal pride type of thing as well. I'm building something, I'm delivering something, not just because I'm getting paid for it, because I believe in it, because I'm proud of it, because I actually want to improve myself and get better at it. And again, especially with open source and with WordPress, where people will actually contribute and will spend their time and their effort and their money and their sanity on building something just from the kindness of their heart, just from believing in an idea or a concept and giving back to that community. So I think that's great. I think we should promote it and improve it and train people and educate them and raise them up to a set of standards that we all agree we should follow. Okay.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.